Hello my friends and welcome back under the waters of Subnautica. While the surface of these might look relatively samey throughout, what's found beneath is anything but. Planet 4546b has a varied landscape of diverse biomes and ecosystems that you have to survive to progress through the games. But which of these is truly the hardest to survive in? Given all the flora, fauna, resources, and environmental hazards, which of these would be the toughest to call a permanent home? Well, let's jump straight into that today so you can see which neighborhood you should look to rent a base in next time. I'll be ranking these on a tier list of very easy, for places where there's little to no danger and it's easy to sustain a base. Doable, places with some danger or some challenge but still fine. Difficult, these places will require a fair bit of effort to survive and or external resources to be brought in. And extreme, these places are nearly impossible to survive or require a ton of effort and preparation to be made viable. So, let's do this. The plateaus of grass are a biome that you likely encounter very early on, and there's a good reason for it. This place is chock full of great base building resources with a ton of fish swimming around for food and water. And while yes, there are things here that could hurt you, like biters and the odd tiger plant, maneuvering around them is usually a piece of cake. It's hard to find many easier places to survive on 4546b. Kelp forests are just gorgeous in my opinion. Truly one of the biomes that sells the feeling of being underwater the best to me. Luckily, they're also a great place to settle down and survive in. With a very forgiving maximal depth of only around 150 meters, enough kelp to keep both you and your bioreactor satisfied, and really only stalkers to worry about, creatures that can be bought over with scraps of metal by the way, this is a great place to be. You'll also find a ton of building materials here, so overall, very easy. Well, there isn't much to say here about the safe shallows. It's literally in the name, this place is very safe, resource rich, and beautiful for any 4546b survivor to enjoy. Yes, there are crash fish, and yes, their sound gives me PTSD. But if I had to stay on this planet, this might just be the place I'd choose. Plentiful resources will support any type of base building you desire, and nutrition couldn't possibly be any easier to come by here. The Sparse Reef is the perfect example of why you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. In my opinion, this biome looks quite spooky, and yet it is among the best places to live on this planet. While the biodiversity here might be low according to the PDA, the amount of resources you can get certainly isn't. Everything a growing base might need can be found around here, with no real danger to worry about unless you count tiger plants. For power, in the shallow parts you can easily use sunlight, and deeper below, you can get bioreactor fuel from the caves. Either way, you'll probably have a pretty easy time. The Delta Island might not be huge, but it makes up for it by being a very nice place to settle. There is no hostile fauna anywhere on this rock, and what is here is a nice helping of resources like titanium, copper, and gold. Food and water might be a bit of a struggle, but you can find a bunch of horseshoe shrubs around that can be eaten and replanted for essentially infinite food. There's no quartz here, so you'll either need to bring some in or use those shrubs with a bioreactor. But as long as you don't freeze, this island should make for a great permanent home. Altera seems to agree. The Glacial Basin is quite a sprawling biome that contains a few open parts and then several tighter interior caves. Certainly quite a few places where one could settle, and honestly, this isn't a bad place at all. You can find all the basic base building resources around, and if you know where to look, also some favorite pepper plants. There's also a fair bit of quartz around for solar panels that will easily keep your base running, and with only snow stalkers to worry about, this might be one of the nicest land places to settle down in on this planet. The Glacial Bay acts in a way as a bridge to much of Sector Zero's surface gameplay, and boy, is this a good bridge to settle. Now yes, there are jellyfish about, but if you can just swim around those, everything here is pretty much perfect for survival. Plenty of resources to build and expand the base, ton of food and water, including my favorite creep vines. You can power your new home with solar panels or even a bioreactor if you're feeling fancy, since there is a ton of biomaterial. And have you seen this place at night? Beautifully easy. There isn't much to say about the Arctic Kelp Forest that's different from the regular ones, except that it might be even safer. There are tons of resources around, unlimited food and or bioreactor fuel, and outside of some sea monkeys that might snatch your equipment, there isn't much to worry about. If you're struggling with those, just use flares to scare them away, or heck, just upload Alan into your brain and they'll give you stuff instead. There aren't many nicer places to settle in Sector 0. Now the Twisty Bridges are another one of those places that looks way scarier than it is in my opinion. It can get relatively deep for a starter area, down to nearly 400 meters, but all throughout you can find good resources, titanium, quartz, copper, and a lot of tasty fish to consume. The only real hazards you have to worry about, for the most part, are brood sharks and drowning. Luckily there are oxygen plants around to help with the latter. Now, if you swim all the way down, things do change with squid sharks and spiky traps, but overall, an exceptional place to set up a permanent residence. The bulb zone is an interesting one, since the biome itself isn't too dangerous, but nearly all the surrounding areas are, so one always has to tread carefully. Sure, amp eels, warpers, and bone sharks don't make for the best neighbors, and technically, even a reaper can be found on the border with the crash zone. That said, the biome itself boasts a reasonable depth of down to just around 500 meters. It gives you a ton of good resources to maintain or expand the base. It might just be one of the easiest places to feed a bioreactor too, given all the bushes. Oh, and did I mention you can eat these? Yeah, more than doable. The Crag Field is a biome that looks a lot more terrifying than it actually is. Rocky spikes jut out from the seabed and form ridges down to just below 500 meters deep, and while they're certainly spooky, about the worst thing swimming between them will be bone sharks or mesmers. In terms of resources, this place holds all the juicy nodes and deposits your heart could desire, so building a base here should not be a problem. For power, you could opt for solar panels in the shallower parts, or perhaps a bioreactor using some of the fish that can easily double as food. Still, tread carefully. Even if the field itself is doable, everything around is much less hospitable. The Grand Reef is a rather varied biome, stretching from about 100 meters deep in its shallowest parts, down to over 600 meters deep in some cavernous depths, and where within this range you choose to settle will massively impact how difficult of a time you will have. Let's cover the basics first. There are resources, and there's plenty of them. Titanium, copper, lithium, quartz, and even uranite crystals if you wanted to use a nuclear reactor for power. On top of that, bladderfish, peepers, and other fauna can provide easy access to food or water. Doesn't sound so bad, right? Well, hold on. There are bone sharks, warpers, even crab squids in deeper parts, and, oh, yes of course, who could forget the ghost leviathan friend? Then again, you basically get unlimited bioreactor fuel, so while it's not easy, it's definitely doable. Similarly to kelp forests, there are multiple mushroom forests in the game, and while within they are quite similar, one does share a massive border with the dunes, so swim carefully. Beside that, they really aren't bad at all. The worst you'll run into are bone sharks or the occasional amp eel that can easily be outmaneuvered between the shrooms. In terms of resources, all the big hitters are here: titanium, copper, and lithium, but sadly no quartz, so you'll need to outsource for windows. Food should be easy enough to come by from small fish, and you can even get your hands on the legendary purple pine cones. Furthermore, if you learn the layout of these well enough, you can spend a ton of time deep without surfacing using brain corals, so survival here is more than doable. Now, despite intersecting a bunch of scary biomes, The sea treader path itself is incredibly chill once you get over these slightly darker waters. Fairly rich on resources including titanium, lithium, and quartz, you can build here to your heart's content. The Leviathans themselves provide an essentially unlimited supply of bioreactor fuel and won't attack you unless you really get in their way. I will say that reaching this biome can potentially be tricky since you can easily wander off to the Blood Kelp Trench, the dunes, or Grand Reef, but if you stick to the Sparse Reef, you should be fine. There are tons of small fish here to eat, so if you don't mind living on the edge of the void, surviving here should be easily doable. First things first, the underwater islands are gorgeous. Truly a beautiful biome to settle in, but certainly not without its share of challenges. First, it's nestled between the Blood Kelp Zone and mountains, a dangerous neighborhood. And second, this place might as well be called Bone Shark City. They are everywhere and certainly don't enjoy having you around. If you can get through that, however, this place is surprisingly resource rich, from titanium through lithium to diamonds. Salt and tube corals can provide water, while the thermal vents at the bottom could be used for power, or, stick to shallow waters and use solar panels. Either way, it's really doable, and your view will be breathtaking. The floating island is tricky. It is above water, and besides the crawlers, there isn't much that could realistically hurt you. There are even existing bases already here. The issue is that's about it. There are plants to eat, but no real resources to gather to build anything further. So yeah, you can make it, but you'll be stuck in broken, corroded bases with no option to customize them or make them more comfortable unless you bring everything in. Doable since it's safe, but not the most comfortable. Yeah, you'd think the mountain island would be very easy, but shockingly, surviving here without venturing out anywhere else would be tough. Yes, you can take shelter in the caves, and there are some resources to find like lithium or diamonds, but what good is that if you can't eat or build a base? Of course, if we count the surrounding waters, this issue goes out the window, but in the interest of staying fair, let's not do that. Sure, if you bring resources here, you can have a great time, but other than that, not so much. The Arctic Spires biome is truly a striking one, as in literally you might be struck by the iceworm that dwells here. That said, if you can avoid the creature, you'll be met with a ton of resources to build or maintain a base, and even the occasional fevered pepper tree to consume for solid nutrition. Of course, it can't all be easy, since you need to first lower the Altera Bridge to access this location, but outside of exposure, there aren't many other dangers, and some solar panels can easily keep your base powered for as long as you need. Just bring a bunch of thumpers. The Arctic biomes are what Sector 0 is all about. Cool deep waters, massive icebergs, and a possible encounter with some angry shrimp. Outside of that, however, life here ain't too bad. There are resources everywhere that can easily sustain a base. Tons of food and water from the plant and sea life around, and if you climb on top of the icebergs, you can even squat in Marge's greenhouse. Do make sure no icicles fall on you though, I imagine that must hurt. The Lilypad Islands are definitely up there as one of the most beautiful biomes in Below Zero. Just look at this place. And they make for a pretty good survival place too. You will have to contend with not one, but two different species of sharks, and in some parts it can get somewhat deep, but you should have pretty much all the resources you need for a growing base, as well as a ton of fish to consume and even whales to ride on. For power, I'd stick with solar panels in the shallower parts, or a bioreactor if you're settling down on the seabed. Not the easiest of places, but more than doable. The purple vents are quite the deceptive biome, since at first glance, they're all bright, beautiful, and quite shallow, barely reaching past 150 meters. But all isn't as it seems. First, the resources. There aren't many. Specifically, there isn't much titanium for base building. There are technically bladderfish here that can be both food and water sources, but it's the other fauna that's the issue. Tons of Cryptococcus, a chelicerae And even the nightmarish crash fish, yeah, no thanks. Not to mention the purple vents themselves that can feel quite hot to the touch. A thermal plant could definitely keep you powered here, but no matter how you slice it, this is a tough place to survive. The Sparse Arctic is, well, sparse of pretty much everything. Well, okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. You can still find a healthy dose of useful resources here, including titanium, quartz, and copper. And since the biome is heavily intertwined with others, you can also find strands of kelp or some stray fish from around. But if we want to be really strict with our ranking, getting water here might prove tough without a filtration machine. Plus, there are brinicles around the whole place for some extra spice. I'd say it's very doable, but you will need some outside resources. The thermal spires are another one of those places that suffers from not having an easy source of water. I mean, beside that, they're pretty great. There are good base building resources like titanium and lithium, plenty of edible fish. The area is mostly shallow enough for solar panels, but of course, you might prefer a thermal plant here, and outside of the occasional Cryptococcus, there aren't too many dangers either. Just don't swim toward anything too warm, and you'll be fine. The tree spires are a truly unique biome with gorgeous vent gardens towering up from the seabed. Unfortunately, it isn't the easiest to survive in. There are resources here, and if you're willing to swim into the fissures below, some great ones too, but it will be deep. On top of that, multiple chelicerates patrol the area, not to mention some rather unfriendly brood sharks. You could use a nuclear reactor here for power, since there is uraninite, but you'll need a water filtration machine so you don't perish of thirst. Not the easiest place to settle. The crystal caves are a real surprise because they are an endgame location for Below Zero, and they even house 2 shadow leviathans, and yet they're shockingly survivable. If you can overcome the depth hurdle, you get just about every resource in the game here, so crafting a base won't be an issue. There are edible fish all around, including bladderfish for water. A bioreactor can easily keep your base alive here, and if you know how to stay close to the crystals, even the shadowy fish can be outmaneuvered. Shockingly doable. The deep Lilypads cave is just an absolutely gorgeous biome to settle down in. Now it is deep, starting just under the 300-meter mark, but for all that swimming, you'll get an absolute ton of resources everywhere to easily build and maintain a base. You likely won't struggle for food much since there are small fish around, however, water might be harder to come by, and you will also have to contend with the occasional squid shark here. Then again, you get essentially unlimited bioreactor fuel everywhere, so keeping the lights on should be very doable. Now the Blood Kelp Zone is one terrifying biome, stretching down to over 600 meters deep and hitting 7 preconditions for stimulating terror in humans. With all that, it's not a surprise that survival here won't exactly be a cakewalk. Amp eels, warpers, and bladders are already rough to maneuver around, not to mention the giant ghost leviathan occupying the northern section, which can make accessing certain sections a nightmare. For power, your best bet will likely be a bioreactor, since there's plenty of fuel around, including gel sacks, which also double as a great source of food. Resources here are solid as well for some of the more endgame items, but you might find yourself strapped for basic building materials, so not ideal. Overall, difficult, but not impossible. The dunes are a complicated one. Of course, everyone will associate it with a ton of reapers straight away, and they're not wrong. There are 8 of them in this area. Even in the day, it's a bit dark, gloomy, and very open with few hiding spots. That said, however, in terms of resources, you can find pretty much everything here needed to build and maintain a sprawling base. Should that base contain a scanner room, you'll even be able to keep track of the reapers in the area. Solar panels in the shallow parts, a thermal plant near the vents, or perhaps a bioreactor will keep it powered consistently, and you certainly won't go hungry either, owing to a rich ecosystem of small fish. Difficult to survive in, but not impossible. Now, at first glance, the mountains appear somewhat similar to the dunes, and to be fair, both boast a solid reaper population. This biome, however, is rather barren, lacking many resources you'd normally use for base building. Good luck finding titanium. There are some small fish around to eat, and thermal vents that could be used for power, but surviving here long term will require solid planning and a fair bit of courage. Oh yes, and probably a stasis rifle. Well, the inactive lava zone is a nerve-wracking biome to be in. You can't see very far, the water boils you alive, and there are 2 sea dragons casually swimming around, not to mention the warpers and lava lizards. Sounds absolutely terrible, but it is surprisingly doable. You can find deposits for just about everything here, even more so if you already have a prawn suit. A reinforced diving suit can take care of the water damage, and while there isn't a ton, some small fish can be found around as a reliable source of food. For the dragons, while they are dangerous, if you stay out of their way, they're usually quite passive and unlikely to constantly pester you. Overall, it's difficult for sure, but not impossible. The Jellyshroom Cave system is a tough place to call permanent home. For being accessible very early on, it gets surprisingly deep, and that's where the challenges only begin. There are practically no resources to easily expand your base, and even fewer sources of water. You can of course grab some oculuses for food, and jelly shrooms can easily power a bioreactor forever, but good luck getting anything to drink. And that's not even mentioning the prevalent crab snakes, which can really mess up your day. Easily up there with the most difficult biomes. The Lost River is one of my favorite biomes in the game. Just look at this place. But that doesn't give it any extra points for survivability. There's a ton of resources here, no copper, but pretty much everything else, solid source of food and water in the form of gel sacks, enough plant life to feed a hungry bioreactor, and even thermal vents for some alternative power. That said, it's deep, with the shallowest parts being more than 500 meters below the surface. Much of the bottom is covered in a painful brine, and every once in a while, a juvenile ghost might show up to mess with you. Challenging, but not extreme. The Fabricator Caverns are essentially Sector Zero's version of the lava zones, an ultra-deep biome hiding some precursor technology and housing large hostile creatures. Well, in this case, you'll need to dive over 600 meters deep to even enter this place, and things won't be getting any easier from then on. Now, there are resources here, titanium, quartz, gold, and some smaller fish to eat, like spinefish, but you will need an external source of water. On top of that, the shadow leviathans here aren't super keen on sharing their space with you, so you'll have to use the crystals to your advantage. Look, either way, this won't be an easy place to call home, but it certainly is a beautiful one. Well, I don't think the placement of this biome will surprise anyone. In my opinion, the Crash Zone easily ranks among the scariest biomes in the game, with little visibility and way too many reapers around every corner. Oh, and did I mention radiation? Even after you fix the Aurora, unless you're staying on the closer side of the ship, everything else around will practically be a death sentence. That said, this place does have a ton of resources and tasty fish to use in cuisine or crafting. On top of that, with a relatively shallow depth in most parts, even just a few solar panels will do the trick to power your base. Still, surviving here comfortably requires fixing the Aurora, navigating murky waters, dodging reapers, and knowing the map pretty well. Very challenging. Right, the lava lakes are just pure suffering. If you choose to make this your permanent home, I mean, good luck. There are no resources here to expand your base, the water itself is spicy, and you're gonna have warpers, lava lizards, and a freaking sea dragon breathing down your neck in a relatively tight space. Sure, there are some fish you can eat, but making a permanent residence down here will require a very high amount of preparation. It does look gorgeous here though. The crater edge, dead zone, void. Where to even begin when I have so much to say? Actually, scratch that. It's just death and suffering. I mean, this pit of despair drops down to below 8 kilometers deep, filled with nothing but bare rocky walls, liminal spaces, and 3 rather angry ghost leviathans. While building a settlement here and surviving is technically possible, it's easily the hardest major biome to do so in the game, and it's not even close. The World Edge. You know, Sector 0 actually has 2 different voids. There's the classic water variant with 3 angry shrimp, and then the Tundra void, which is on land and just completely barren. I suppose not having the Chelicerates would make it a bit easier, but regardless, this is by far the hardest place to survive in Below Zero, and probably the last I'd recommend is a permanent home. But heck, it's not impossible, so you do you. And there you have it, my friends. That is my ranking of all the biomes on the Subnautica planet, based on how challenging they are to survive in. Let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my placements, and thank you so much for watching. I want to give a special thanks to all of our incredible members: Proximity, Michael Barbosa, Cody the Bunboy, Ghost Driver, Janos, G-Quater, Death Stranding, Tree4646, Esteva Omello, Julian, Callum Whaley, Shitsu, E. Michael, Philip Svoboda, MR, Musical Soul, Yuzuv Ismail Tatar, OG Burner, Master Uguay, Silver Soul, Kronos, and Krenda. Thank you guys so much. Your support means the world to me. With that, I want to thank you all for watching. I'll see you legends in whatever next video I make. Bye bye. Maybe on Subnautica too, who knows.